And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Schooner Morning Show. I'm your host, Mark Prevost, and I am here today with Mr. Robert Davis. We call him Bob affectionately. Bob's been with us for a long time, and we are the better off for it. Bob, welcome to the show.
Well, I thought maybe I should put into perspective what it means, that picture that shows me as a veteran. Back when I was in college, I got some news reports that there was something going on in Korea and my draft board might want to talk to me. I didn't know until I went on the honor flight 70 years later that there was a reason for people fighting in Korea, but since I didn't know what the reason was, and even now that I know what it was, I'm not sure I wanted to fight, but Korea didn't have a navy. I had a roommate who located a possibility to become a naval officer in in World War II. They called them the 90-day wonders, but it took me 120 days to become a naval officer. Korea didn't have a navy. I spent the whole time protecting the country against invasion from Russia flying across the North Pole. I was on an icebreaker. Now, it looked to me like I was getting a 3-year detour from my trajectory to become a research astronomer. And so what it turned out, instead of it being a detour, while during that 3 years, space travel changed from being Flash Gordon to being real. And that was the direction I was heading. And basically I missed having to worry about the changes because they happened while I was in the Navy. And when I got out, well, let's first look at what happened that wouldn't happen otherwise. I'd been writing letters to my father's favorite cousin about our genealogy, and the Navy sent me to Treasure Island in San Francisco to learn all that I would ever need to know about vacuum tube circuitry. And that cousin, Ruth, in the generation older than I am, said to stop by their house on the way back to Boston. So I did, and they said their daughter was in the Navy in Newport. I was headed to the Navy near Newport. Why don't I meet her? Well, we both had love at first sight.
No kidding. Both in the Navy, you and your wife Ruth.
I met my wife because the Navy allowed me to drive an ancient car across the country.
Start at the beginning. Where were you born? Where did you get brought into the world?
I was born in Omaha.
Omaha, Nebraska.
Omaha, Nebraska. Ruth was born in Laramie, Wyoming. And if you've been to that part of the country, it's flyover country. But back when I was born, you couldn't buy an airplane ticket. You could fly it if you knew how.
Right, the Wright brothers hadn't even flown theirs yet, had they?
When I was born, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
They-
just teasing you, Bob. Oh, boy, that's funny.
Okay, so the Navy gave me a wife. It turned out that it wasn't quite appropriate for an enlisted sailor to be married to an officer, and my housing allowance was more than her salary, so she got out.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
But let's go back up a little bit. Did you go to school in Nebraska? Is that where you got all your...
No. I was born in Omaha.
In a hospital or at home?
Yes. I think it was a birthing home.
Midwife type of thing?
It wasn't it was the way they did things back
Right,
then.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Anyhow, 2 days later, the stock market found out about it and turned belly up.
So you folks, did you move? Where did you go to school?
Well, I went to school in Des Moines, Iowa.
Yeah.
2 weeks after I graduated from high school, we moved back to Omaha.
Oh, no kidding.
But I didn't know any better, so I applied to Harvard. I didn't know it was hard to get into, but I got in.
And you got in, and you were on the way to astronomy, right? That was your passion.
In 1940, I got a private tour of Mount Wilson Observatory when I was 10 years old because I'd already decided I was going to be an astronomer, and we happened to be in California.
At 10 years old, you already knew that you wanted to do that?
Oh, yes.
Boy, you're lucky. That is...
I got a private tour of the spectroheliograph. He didn't know I knew how to pronounce it.
Wow. So you studied that at Harvard?
And I studied that as an undergraduate. There were about half a dozen undergraduates and about a half a dozen graduate students, and there were 5 instructors in the department, one of whom was a professor and the other of whom were on their way to becoming professors. And they all had picnics, they all had parties.
Yeah.
Some of the parties were picnics, some of the parties were square dancing, but it isn't what you know, it's who you know that counts.
Sure.
So anyhow, Fred Whipple, who was about the age of my father, who'd been riding his bicycle to the observatory since 1930 or so, was one of them. And when I was in the Navy, I got a letter from him. Stop by and see Austin Stanton on your way back. Austin Stanton was a Texas millionaire who was willing to hire me at a good salary for doing satellite work. The Navy didn't want to know the Army to know what they were doing, so everybody, the word was secret.
Big secret. Yeah.
A big secret until Sputnik went up.
Yeah, then all of a sudden it was, hey, we're behind here.
It was not quite the satellite that we'd planned for, but I got involved in satellite tracking because I knew everything to be known about vacuum tube circuits. They put me in charge of getting something to tell them what time it was that we were taking their pictures.
For those of you that haven't picked up on it yet, Bob has a very unique sense of humor. I want you all to know that.
And so for 3 months, I got a good salary, and I never told the bank about it, but we got a good mortgage because the Navy allowed veterans to get good mortgages. So for $70 a month, principal, interest, and taxes, we bought a house.
Where?
Arlington Heights, Massachusetts.
Arlington Heights, Massachusetts.
It was within bicycle range of the observatory, and if I didn't like the weather, I could, for 10 cents, I could ride a streetcar. I don't know whether anybody born since 1950 has ever seen a streetcar.
I remember the streetcars. They still have them. They still have them in San Francisco.
Oh,
And Boston had them with the electric overhead.
yeah, I've ridden the ones in San Francisco too.
Yeah.
They're more fun than the ones in
Yes,
Boston.
that's true. That's true. So did you raise your family in Massachusetts?
Yes. Well, Carolyn was one of. She was born in 1954 when I was still in the Navy. But by then I'd been sent to Texas, Southeast Texas.
Yeah.
So 2 years in the Arctic, 1 year in Southeast Texas. That erased all possibility of me ever knowing whether it was hot or cold. I could be comfortable any place.
Anywhere. Right.
But I like Maine better than Texas.
Yeah. So I know you have 2 daughters and a son. The first daughter was
the first daughter was
in Texas.
born, paid for by the Navy. My house in Texas for $20 a month was built by the Navy. The last time I saw it, I looked on Google Maps,
Yeah.
Street View,
Yeah.
and I think my house was the one that was halfway collapsed. The one next to it had been thrown away a long time earlier and replaced by something modern.
Yeah.
But anyhow, and when my parents came to visit, the mosquitoes tried to carry them away, but before we could get to the door to open it. I used to go on vacations in Minnesota, and a mosquito bite me. Up pops a mosquito bite. After a year in Texas, these northern mosquitoes, I have not had a mosquito bite. I've had them bite me. I've seen them go in.
Yeah.
I've seen them fill up with blood, but I no longer get mosquito bites. I got all the antivenom
Yeah.
shot into me in Texas.
Right. So you're immune now to mosquito bites.
Right.
Wow. So tell us about the other 2 children and where they were born, because it seems like you moved around.
3. Okay. Debbie was born in Mount Auburn Hospital in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She was 6 and Carolyn was 10 when Paul was born at Mount Auburn Hospital in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And he was 2 years old when Elizabeth was born at Mount Auburn Hospital in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Ah.
Mount Auburn Hospital was named after Mount Auburn Cemetery. It was a stopping point on your way to the cemetery.
Oh, Bob. So you spent most of your time In Massachusetts.
Yes.
And
Well, uh, let's see, the Navy paid for my PhD, they paid for my house, they paid for my first daughter, they paid for me to get married, and they gave me the credentials I needed for 3 months of a good salary, followed by the start on a permanent career, just because I knew something about vacuum tube circuits. Everything was going fine. The clocks, there was a place in Wisconsin called the Norman Clock Factory. Well, I went out there to talk to Dr. Norman. The factory was in his basement. He knew he was able to make what we needed, and when I was visiting him, I got a knock on the door at 6 a.m. He said, "Shall we go swimming?"
what?
This is in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And so we went swimming.
What was the idea there? He wanted to hire you?
No, I wanted to buy 12 clocks to run our telescopes to tell us what time it was.
I see.
And that was fine until the man who built the telescope said that they had to run on a synchronous motor, 60 cycles, more accurate than anything that could come down the line to us.
Yeah.
Especially since only 2 of those telescopes were going to be in the United States, and the rest of them we had to invent the electricity to go 60 cycles. A very accurate 60 cycles.
Yeah.
And so somebody found out that there was an amplifier sitting in the physics department at Harvard that was just what we needed. And by then, somebody else was responsible for such things. And would you know it, the winning bidder was the one that was willing to make 12 Chinese copies of something that had been designed 20 years earlier.
No kidding. No kidding.
The electronic engineer that took over before those 12 were ordered called them the least efficient cigarette lighter he'd ever seen, and proceeded to light his cigarette by putting it on one of the vacuum tubes. There were 4 of these things in there, and each of them was 4 filaments inside. The one that was shipped to Australia, halfway across the Pacific Ocean, the power transformer came loose and bashed up everything inside on the rest of its way to Australia. And the engineer responsible for such things refused to fly any place, anywhere, for any reason. Who gets sent to Australia when they couldn't figure out why they couldn't fix it? Me. I looked at it, they had 2 wires switched. In 30 seconds from the time I got there, it was fixed.
You're kidding. Wow.
I spent 2 weeks touring the facility, touring the outback, and when we drove around the fence that we hadn't come in, the security guards told us that they couldn't open the fence for us to go back. We'd have to drive around it because we didn't have permission. Well, that was the Australian missile tracking station. The satellite tracking observatory was part of the same network, but it was outside of the fence. So anyhow, Ruth gets a ring on the doorbell when I'm out of town. It's the FBI. Did your husband tell you that he's applied to be an astronaut?
Had you really applied to be an astronaut?
I was one of the 64 finalists. I got the medical exam. Oh my. None of my doctors had ever heard about half the tests they gave me.
Sure.
And
I never knew that, Bob. You applied to be one of the first astronauts. You've been holding out on us.
One of the first scientist astronauts.
Scientist astronauts.
There were 64 of us got the medical exam.
Yeah.
60 of us passed. 8 of us, there were 8 slots. One of my friends got to ride on the last Challenger that came back to Earth. Oh no, the last one that floated back to Earth.
No.
Yeah, he. Another one that I didn't meet wrote a book called The Making of an Ex-Astronaut. He went through flight school but decided he didn't like it. And I ended up going back, finishing my PhD, and getting 20 or 30 paid vacations to Europe, so long as I'd give a talk someplace or other.
Oh my God, what a, so you've really seen the inefficiencies of the federal government firsthand.
I've been part of the inefficiency.
They've treated you very, very well. You've benefited.
Fred Whipple was the one that said, get a civil service job. It has better perks than anything else you could ever get.
Right.
It isn't what you know, it's who you know that counts.
Yes, I've heard that many, many times.
And so it was 30 years later that the federal government decided they couldn't afford it, but they grandfathered me in. That's why I can afford to be at Schooner. Then Bill Clinton offered to buy out any federal employee that wanted it out. Well, I was 64 years old at the time. I wanted out. It was obvious that I was never going to be a famous astronomer, so I might as well get out. And they said they didn't mind losing me, but they didn't want to lose my billet. Could I stay in for another 6 months and get a normal retirement? And they, instead of giving me the buyout money, they would hire me on the other kind. Smithsonian has all kinds of money. And the other kind of money, I was on Social Security again. And so I was able to work 2 days a week doing the part of my job that nobody else wanted to learn how.
Which was?
Which was scheduling the telescopes and figuring out how to put the data in such a form that everybody could use it. That was, they were willing to pay me 2 days a week, and I spent 1 day a week figuring out how to make it more efficient and the other day doing it. And by the time I moved to Maine, I was able to do it in 1 day a week. And it didn't matter whether I was riding the bicycle to Cambridge or sitting in my basement. I was staying in front of a computer typing.
Right, right.
Which was okay for 1 day a week, but 5 days a week, no. But
Right.
anyhow, that temporary part-time, no perks job lasted 15 years.
Wow, wow.
So I got Social Security too.
You've done very, very well. And you're not going to believe this, we've already been 30 minutes. This is the longest interview we've ever had. But you're such interesting things, and you've lived through so many different things and done so much. We just scratched the surface.
Right. And which is worse, sending all the black people to jail or sending all the 20-year-olds to walk through the fields carrying a gun and shooting at people
And
getting shot at?
Right, right. So, Bob, I know you play bridge. Is there anything else you would want your friends and neighbors here at Schooner to know about you? Hobbies, interests?
Well, up until the time that I lost the use of my knees, I loved to ride bicycles. And there's a stationary bike here. That's no fun. The bicycle got hit by 3 cars. Well, I got 3 new bicycles. I got the same ski jacket, paid for 3 times. And I always wore a yellow vest when I was cycling, and every time I got hit was on Huron Avenue in Cambridge. The bicycle got hit. The only time a car hit me, it was the windshield. It acted just like a trampoline. It shattered, but the plastic held it in place and threw me out beyond the bicycle.
Boy, oh boy. You've got 9 lives. That dangerous area.
Fred Whipple never wore an orange vest, and the people couldn't see him, so they never hit him. He rode on Huron Avenue through Cambridge, same way I did.
Yeah, yeah. That's funny.
He was still doing it when he was 90. I gave my bicycle away when I moved, when I left Harrison 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But I was never comfortable on it outside of the city limits of Harrison, which is about, I used to ride it to the post office.
But Harrison, I can see outside the city limits, you've got nothing. You're either in the dirt or you're on the road.
Right, and Route 121 or Route 117 was not something that I ever felt comfortable on the bicycle. So I pretty much stayed inside of Harrison.
Well, Bob, as always, very, very interesting. I can't thank you enough for coming down and being on our show. This has been the Schooner Morning Show. Bob Davis, up in apartment 433, the 3rd floor in Camden. Very, very interesting man. Stop by and say hello sometime or meet him in the hallway. Make sure you wear your mask and tune in every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 10:05.
Or eat lunch at 1 o'clock and I'll be there.
And Bob's there. Have a great day, everybody.